Good evening, everyone. It is 7 o'clock here on the East Coast, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our webinar about the Great Backyard Bird Count. Really excited to have you here tonight talking about this super fun participatory science project. I do want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and I will send a link to the recording as well as links to any resources that we discussed tonight in a follow-up email. So don't worry if you don't get everything jotted down, you'll be able to review it again later. Before we get too far along, I do want to go over a couple quick Zoom things. I often recommend that you actually exit full screen. So if my screen is full screen for you, I recommend that you exit full screen by using the view options at the top and hitting exit full screen, or sometimes just hitting escape will do it. The reason I recommend that is it will allow you to dock the chat window to the side, and that's where I'll be sharing links, and we'll have some opportunities to ask questions and some discussions as we go along. So to open your chat window, you're going to look for the little speech bubble icon, and then the last thing I want you to check is where it says to. There should be a little drop down. Switch that to say to everyone. That way we can see what each other are saying and share ideas. Awesome. And feel free to flag me down if you have any sound issues or anything as we go along as well. So I'm coming to you from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds and nature. And it is a snowy day here in Ithaca, so it doesn't look quite as green and sunny as it does in this image. But the Visitor Center did recently undergo a remodel, so if you haven't come and seen us for a while, highly recommend you come check us out. Lots of exciting things to do at the Visitor Center now. And I am part of the K-12 education program. My name is Kelly Schaefer, and I'm our outreach coordinator. And I am joined today by Becca, who is the project leader for the Great Backyard Bird Count. So you'll get to hear from her, and she'll get to explain this awesome participatory science project to you. But here at K-12 Education Team, we create innovative resources and deliver trainings that empower educators to build young people's science skills through nature, participatory science, and inquiry. So basically, we get to help package all the really amazing stuff that the lab does and make it available to educators. And all of our resources and trainings fall somewhere among these three pillars: nature connection, participatory science, and inquiry investigations. Today, we're really going to be focusing on that nature connection and participatory science piece, because what we really love to do here on our team is try to get kids to change their conception of what a scientist is and who can be a scientist. Because if you ask a kid to draw a scientist, this is usually what you get. A guy in a white lab coat with some beakers and some equations. Sometimes there's wild Einstein hair. This guy has a really excellent mustache. And this is science, right? It's just kind of a narrow conception of science. So we want people and kids to start viewing folks who are outside asking and answering questions about nature as scientists too. They're helping us understand the ways that our world works, all the way to viewing themselves as scientists and knowing that they can do the things that scientists do. And that's where programs like the Great Backyard Bird Count can come really in handy. So our goal for today's webinar is to talk about what participatory science is and why it's great for educators. We'll introduce the Great Backyard Bird Count, and then I'll share some activities and resources that will help you get kids excited about participating in the GBBC, as well as building some skills that they'll need. So what is participatory science? Let me throw this question out to you. Please feel free to share ideas in the chat window, any projects, keywords, definition that comes to mind. I will say that you might be more familiar with the term citizen science or community science. We recently made a change at the lab to use the term participatory science because it's a bit more welcoming, and we're really excited to have everyone feel welcomed in these sorts of projects. So I'm seeing ideas like citizens as scientists. Yeah, so regular folks like you and me who aren't professional scientists, providing data from observations to be used by scientists. Absolutely. Emily is bringing up Project Feeder Watch. That's a great participatory science project where people collect data and share it. Connecting to the environment. Yeah, absolutely. Lots of great ideas coming in. Hands-on learning. Absolutely, Alicia. eBird and iNaturalist are great projects. Yeah, so we're pulling together a lot of the really important pieces of what participatory science is. So at its heart, it is folks like you, me, and our students who are interested in the world sharing our observations to databases that scientists can then use to answer real-world questions. We really do view this as a partnership here at the lab. We try to give folks access to the data that they help collect as well. But I really love participatory science because it is so diverse. There's so many different projects out there. So if your students aren't into birds, which I don't know why they wouldn't be, but then I am pretty biased. If they're into bugs, if they're into stars, if they're into earthworms or plants, there are projects out there for your students to meet their interests. Because what's so great about participatory science is the amount of projects that are out there. They can be totally online to totally outside. They can be from on the scale of our universe to the scale of the microscopic, global projects to hyperlocal projects. So it really is a really incredible group of science projects that we can get involved in. And it really does help us better understand our world. The data that we collect and our youth collect goes into databases that scientists are using to answer real-world questions. If you're interested in learning more about participatory science, participatorysciences.org or scistarter.org are great places to go. Scistarter.org is a fantastic place to go to look up projects so you can find them by topic or by the age of the folks who will be doing it, whether you want it to be online or outside. And for us as educators, it is just a really great tool for us to use. It helps us meet our science and learning standards while providing our youth with a low-cost, year-round opportunity to get to know their local environments. It can spark a lifelong passion and really get kids' curiosity running. And it helps kids feel connected to the real world. It helps us answer the essential question of why are we doing this? We're doing it because your data really matters. So the information that kids are collecting is really going to be used. It has a real purpose. So that is participatory science in a nutshell. So I'd love for us now to take a moment and dive into the Great Backyard Bird Count in specific. I would love to turn it over to Becca. Becca, would you like to tell us more about the Great Backyard Bird Count?
Hi, Kelly, and everyone on tonight. I would love to. I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Okay.
Well, Well, thank you, everyone. Can you see that full screen?
Yep, looks good.
Audio's good? Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for taking some time out of your evening and busy weeks to participate in this webinar tonight. It is always a pleasure to work with Kelly, and it is always a pleasure to talk with educators. I do actually consider myself still an educator. I have a degree in environmental education, and I actually taught high school for several years. So I really value what you all are doing day in and day out with young people. And if you wanted to weave in some GBBC in that work, we would be delighted to have you. For those of you who are really new to the GBBC, I'm going to give you some good background tonight and talk a little bit about how to do it. And then I believe Kelly will help answer sort of maybe some of your questions around how this might look for educators. So stay tuned. We'll try to get everybody's questions answered. This year, the count always runs during what is considered President's Day weekend in the United States, and it's Family Day weekend in Canada, which is fun. And obviously those dates change every year. This year it is the 14th through the 17th. And I love this picture down below. This is a group of pre-Kers. Yes, you can do it with pre-Kers. That was submitted a couple of years ago, and it always warms my heart every time I see this image out looking at the geese there in the grass. So much fun and very sweet. A little bit of history, because who doesn't love a good history lesson, right? The Great Backyard Bird Count's been around for a while. This is our 28th year. It started in 1998, so it's one of our longer running projects. Project Feeder Watch, I saw referenced in the chat. That one is even older, which is really fun. And this project started as a joint collaboration between the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and the National Audubon Society. We were one of the first projects where we actually delivered real-time data to participants as we got it, as it came in. That was sort of new and groundbreaking at the time that GBBC started. Now it's very much kind of the status quo, especially for those of you that do eBird, right? And you can really see submissions that they come in. But it was kind of groundbreaking at the time that GBBC started. And this is probably my favorite fact for those of you that love Merlin and love eBird. Um, the GBBC was kind of the experiment for whether the lab should invest in creating eBird. So the development of eBird started in early 2000, was kind of launched officially in a soft launch in 2002. And what they had done is the Great Backyard Bird Count, they said, let's try providing an event where people can submit their bird data to us. And if it's successful, that tells us that people are excited about this. And maybe we should spend the time to invent a tool so people can submit their bird information to us 365 days a year. Well, the overwhelming response was people love this. People love their birds, they love sharing their data. And so the lab then decided to go full on in developing eBird. So I love that tidbit because now eBird, of course, is this significant project that we do put all our data in, but it wasn't really developed until after the GBBC. And then Birds Canada is one of our official partners too. We brought them on in 2009 as a way to sort of help spread the word into Canada. And as many of you know, today it is a global event. We collected data on a separate sort of database and a separate system previous to 2013, but in 2013, after eBird had really gotten its feet under itself and was really globally representative, we decided to go ahead and put data right into eBird. And I'll talk a little bit later about why that's a powerful thing. And as many of you probably know, birding is growing and it's global. Each little yellow light you see here is a checklist that was submitted during GBBC. And then when it goes gray, it's still there, obviously, but that signifies that it's nighttime. And the shadow that's kind of moving across the screen here represents the sun. And it just kind of will play over and over again. So you can see that the minute the light hits, and sometimes not even the light, right? If we do nocturnal birds, birds, people are submitting birds and they're submitting them at huge rates, which is just so inspiring to see. And this is one of my favorite things to do with my son during GBBC is we watch the submission map because it's just so cool to realize that our one checklist is one of many checklists that are coming in, and he loves to see sort of the light that goes off when we submit ours and then to watch what's coming in other parts of the world. And each year we tend to grow, which is really inspiring. Every year I think we've hit our max, and then it keeps growing. And we had more than 600,000 people from around the world participating during those 4 days. So it's fun as an educator to be able to help your students connect that their data is significant and it's coming in with many, many other data points from around the world, which is one of the reasons why that data is so valuable and powerful. Because I think I saw somebody reference that that's a lot of data that scientists couldn't do on their own, right? We're tapping into people to help us with that process. So what do you do? For those of you that are really brand new to this, and maybe you're familiar with eBird, it's very similar, but with some modest little changes. You literally watch the birds for 15 minutes, wherever you are. And then you share those. You can also listen, obviously, if auditory birding is more of your strength. And then you share what you are seeing or hearing through Merlin and or eBird. The major difference between those two is that Merlin, we're not going to ask you how many of those bird species that you saw or heard. We just want to know that you saw them. And that's considered an incidental sighting, which is actually important data because it tells us where birds are and when. If you prefer to do checklists, you can count all of the birds that you see in those 15 minutes and submit that via an eBird checklist. So you have some options. We actually brought Merlin into the GBBC ecosphere, so to speak, a couple of years ago because we wanted to provide an option for people that are newer to birds. And Merlin is a really good tool for all ages, especially if you're just sort of getting used to identifying birds. And I love to use Merlin a lot when I'm traveling, when I'm in a place where birds are new and different. And so Merlin is a really great tool for that as we're learning our birds either for the first time or in that place for the first time. And you literally can do GBBC anywhere, because we all know that pretty much everywhere in the world there are birds, which means you can tell us about them wherever you are. So many people love to do this right outside their homes, in the birds they see in and around their houses and communities and properties. Some people go for walks. Some people, perhaps like yourselves, will engage young people in their schools or nature centers or libraries, all kinds of informal or formal education centers. Businesses participate, botanical gardens participate, nursing homes or assisted living facilities participate. It is really fun to see the diversity of different organizations that come together to share their birds. And why participate? Well, that's a really good question. It's fun. It's easy. These are both really good reasons to do anything, right? It's fun and it's easy. But it also is this really beautiful way to connect to nature, no matter where you are, because birds are there. It also helps, especially young people and students, depending on where they're at in their journey, often feel a sense of empowerment that their observations and their data have value. They're seen as valuable contributions. So that often is very motivating for people. And of course, it begins to help us provide continued long-term records on birds, right? We've been collecting bird census data for well over 50 years now, and each year the amount that we are collecting because we're engaging people in this process is growing and growing, which is really inspiring and allows us to see patterns. And then, as we already discussed, this allows us to be collecting data in places and all of the time in a way that individual scientists just wouldn't have the capacity to be able to do. So that's really fun and exciting. And then on the scientific end, there is a lot that is done with data. And as I said, all of the data collected during GBBC goes into the eBird database, whether it's your Merlin submissions that are incidental sightings or whether it's your checklists. It all gets saved into eBird. And last year in 2024, this number grows every year too, and it always impresses me. eBird data was actually used in more than 248 scientific publications. That is a lot of scientists around the world that are exporting eBird data and asking a variety of different types of questions. As it relates to birds, we learn a lot about migration patterns. And as you can imagine, some of those migration patterns are shifting and changing in the world, and our eBird data often helps us understand how those shifts and changes are happening. It allows us to see changes from year to year, right? There's lots of reasons why birds do what they do and go where they go, and sometimes it does change, and sometimes it changes just for a season or just for a 12-month period, and then it goes back to patterns we're used to. Without kind of the eBird data sphere, we wouldn't know those things are happening, so we're allowed to see some of those short and long-term changes. And then, of course, we can see trends, right? We can start to begin to see changes in bird populations, in bird abundance, in where birds are living, where they're not living, where they're moving to. So these trends are only possible because we have this longitudinal data set. And I already talked about the tools to participate, but just to again emphasize, you can use any of these tools depending on what technology you have available to you and you want to engage your students and community with. Merlin is a great one to begin with. There's three sort of ways that you can enter data on Merlin now. There's one that's very brand new. You can just record sounds, and then you do need to make sure that you select the green button that says "This is my bird" and tell us the location of where that sound was recorded in order for it to count towards GBBC. But sounds are totally acceptable and appropriate. You can also go through what's pictured here, which is sort of a question word flow where you'll be asked a variety of questions, and then at the end it'll give you some options. Generally speaking, one of the options is usually the bird you're seeing. Merlin is relatively accurate, up in the high 90s, and then you would again select that green button, "This is my bird," and you would give us the location. And then the final way that eBird or that Merlin has now allowed you to ID birds that I really love, for those of you that love Project Feeder Watch, which I also participate in, and you kind of count your birds by looking at the pictures. You can go to the Explore tab in Merlin and see sort of the birds that are most likely to be seen in your area now, and you can actually ID a bird right from there, say, "Yes, this is the bird that I'm seeing." And if you select that green button, "This is my bird," it does count towards GBBC. So I think that's kind of a fun way because you're using photos and images and you're given a pre-selected list of birds that you're likely to see. So any of those ways in Merlin work. And then eBird Mobile is wonderful for those of you that want to do a checklist and be on the go with it. It's a great tool. It'll identify where you are for you, which is kind of fun. You just have to confirm that that's your location and sometimes map it. And then, of course, you can checklist right from there. And then some people, including myself sometimes, honestly, when I bird, you just want to make a checklist when you're out on a walk. You're just going to write some birds down, or maybe you're going to use your memory. And then when you come back to the computer later in the day, you're going to enter those birds in. And that's absolutely acceptable too. You would just go to ebird.org on a computer or tablet or laptop and enter your birds. So all of those ways will get your data in and counting for GBBC. On the GBBC website, we do have some support resources for educators that might be of interest. The URL up there will take you to a page that has a couple of different things on it for educators. It walks you through, and perhaps Kelly is going to talk about this too, how you would create an account if you are working with young people who are not yet 13. Technically, eBird wants the people that have accounts to be 13 or over. So she and or on this website, they'll walk you through some ideas for how to get through that can feel like a stumbling block, but there's lots of ways to get through that. It also gives some information about how to count in groups, which can be a little bit tricky. All of these pictures are groups of people of different ages that went out and contributed. So some hints on how to do that and what that might look like. And then there are also some links to activities to do before and after. Many of them come from the K-12 team, and there's a few from the Audubon program as well there. So check out that website if you are thinking about doing this and you want some more ideas. And I know that Kelly's going to talk about some great stuff too. And then this is a relatively new thing, which I'm super excited about. I created this map last year, and this is only the second year we've had it, but we get so many people doing these GBBC events all over the world with groups. It's kind of a unique thing. A lot of people do eBird, but not everybody does eBird as a group. GBBC tends to really bring out sort of a group camaraderie and spirit, so I wanted to be able to visualize that a little bit better. So there's a map. You can get to it from our homepage at birdcount.org. And we are encouraging anybody who's doing any kind of a community group event to enter it onto the map. You can also, if it is open to the public, you can state whether it's open to the public or not. I know a lot of school events are not open to the public, so you can 100% say no. But if it isn't a public event, you can add a link in there. And so the hope and desire is not only can we get a visual appreciation of all these events happening all over the world at the same time on these 4 days, but we can also then perhaps find a community group. So if you live in an area where there's an event close by and you'd like to join a community event, you can click on these maps and kind of move around and get a sense and join a community. So if you're doing an event, even if it's not public, add it to our map. It's really fun to see how many people are organizing around this. Whoops, sorry. And that is all I have for you tonight. I am happy to answer questions via email. I know Kelly is going to cover a lot of it. We've done this together before, so she is as knowledgeable as anyone. But my email is also there, gbbc@birds.cornell.edu. Please follow up with me if you have questions that aren't answered tonight, or you would like me to explain anything further. And as always, Kelly, thank you for doing this and encouraging your community to get out with their young people and participate in the GBBC this year.
Thank you so much for being here, Becca. I always love hearing the history from you.
No problem. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thanks, Becca. All right. So I see we have a question in the chat window. Where can you find the map for schools to add themselves? Um, let's see.
I'm still here. That is on our homepage, so birdcount.org. If you scroll down to the bottom, it's right there on the homepage, and you can add it there.
Thank you. Awesome.
Mhm.
All right. So now we have a wonderful idea of the history of the Great Backyard Bird Count and some of the tools that are available to you as you prepare to participate. I also want to make sure that I share with you some of the other resources that are available around the lab and from our program. So let's jump right in now to talking about some resources and activities that you can use to help get your kids ready to participate. I do see we have a question. Can the groups be any groups or just schools? Anyone can participate in the Great Backyard Bird Count, from individuals to um, school groups to, as Becca mentioned, there's sometimes folks in, assisted living places that have a group that does birding as well. So yes, totally anyone from the individual to a group can participate in this program. All right. So first, let me throw a question out to you. What skills do you think would help us make our students good participatory scientists or good GBBC scientists? Curiosity, absolutely. Erin's mentioning being quiet. Yes, sometimes it's equally important to prep our students to be outside. And one of the things we can help them think about is how they want to behave while they're out there and what they think will help them see the most birds. I love throwing that question out to kids because then they sometimes self-police if they're the ones who come up with some of these ideas, like being quiet and focusing, having patience, moving slowly. I also see other skills are being mentioned. I see observation mentioned quite a bit. Absolutely. That is such a great skill for any scientist. Interest, curiosity. Oh, recording observations. Absolutely. Yes. And so many of these things are skills that we can practice and we can help our students practice. So one of the skills that I always think about is observation, and that's one that you all brought up a ton. And sometimes when you're not used to observing birds, half the battle is learning how to look at them. But one of the things I love to do is build those observation skills and think of it and help your students think of it as a skill that they can get better at over time. So some of the things we'll go over just now are ways to build those observation skills, things and tools to use to practice your bird ID, and then some activities to help you get to know your local birds. And a lot of these are free resources that I will share links to in the chat window. So the first one I want to bring up is our Explorers Guidebook. This guidebook was inspired by the Every Kid in a Park initiative, which was an initiative designed to get fourth graders free access to our national lands. So the guidebook is written at a fourth grade level, but I've seen it used by older kids and younger kids with an adult helping them. And the whole idea is just to get kids outside and practicing their observation skills and moving towards bird ID, but I would say observation is just the biggest part of it. And one of my very favorite activities for getting kids to start to tune into birds is in this, and that would be the sound map. So the idea behind the sound map is that you go outside with a piece of paper and you map the sounds that you hear around you. So you can put a little X in the center of your paper to mark where you're standing, and then your challenge is to mark the sounds that you hear both in direction and distance from you. And kids can get really creative with this. They can mark the sounds that they hear with symbols, with words, or with drawings, or some combination thereof, like Kayla did in this map here. And it is a really fun activity because kids will hear things that they don't normally hear. They'll be surprised that they can hear a chipmunk running on the ground, or that they can hear the sound of the air conditioning unit. It's just interesting to hear them tune into things or sounds that they usually tune out. And usually they'll pick up on some bird sounds, which provides a really excellent opportunity to talk about bird song and how that can even be used to identify some of our bird neighbors. So this is a really fantastic activity. You can adjust it up or down in age, depending on how long you give youth to do this. Sometimes I like to open it with a poem for, I would say, elementary or middle schoolers, just to kind of help them enter that calm, quiet space. Super fun activity. Great way to start building up our sound as an observation skill. Another great resource for you as you build both observation and bird ID skills is our Feathered Friends resource. This is a free download. There are 10 monthly lessons designed to be kind of a monthly check-in with your local birds. There are indoor and outdoor components, and it covers themes from bird diversity to habitat to migration to conservation and even participating in the Great Backyard Bird Count. And what's cool about it is there are lots of activities that get you outside and just looking at and tuning into your local habitat, like having you do a habitat map of your schoolyard or neighborhood, where you consider all the components of a habitat that a bird needs present? What could you do, like add a bird bath or add a bird feeder that might help? But you also get to meet new birds every month. So that can help you start to build your bird ID skills, add to the groups of birds that you know. If you are working with older kids, we have just released a new resource for non-formal educators. So it's not really designed for the classroom, could be used in the classroom setting, but it's designed with things like summer camps and after school clubs and things like that in mind. And the goal is to teach bird ID and science skills and have kids become participatory scientists by using eBird Project. But it can also provide you with a lot of great activities if you are thinking of jumping into the Great Backyard Bird Count. So there are 11 lessons, they're each an hour long, and gosh, I want to see lessons 3 through 7 just about are bird ID lessons. So there are a lot of great activities that you can pull from this. I'll talk about one in just a moment. Um, and it's really designed with positive youth development goals in mind. So helping kids start to view themselves as scientists and build some life skills as they are getting ready to contribute to the eBird project. You can kind of see a breakdown of the different lessons here and how they fit into these three main goals. I want to jump into some bird ID, but Becca went into Merlin pretty well, so we won't spend a ton of time on that, and I will instead kind of jump around and focus on some different things, but I do want to just highlight a couple things about Merlin for a second. So as Becca said, there are 4 different ways to use Merlin. There's that step-by-step ID, which is that question flow that Becca mentioned, which will help walk you through to a bird identification. There's also the Sound ID tool, which is a fantastic tool. It's basically Shazam for bird songs. If we have time, I can demonstrate that for us, but for now, I'll skip it. There's also a photo ID tool if you're lucky enough to get a photo with your phone's camera. You can use computer visioning to help you identify it. And then there's that Explore tool. And the Explore tool, which is found down here on this bottom icon panel, is great for using it like a field guide. So like a traditional field guide, but there's also a cool way to use it, like Becca mentioned, where you can tune into your local birds and know what you could expect to see if you were to go out birding on that day. So to do that, you would go to your Merlin app, you would click the Explore tab, and then up in the upper right-hand corner, there is what's sometimes called a hamburger menu or a slider menu, depending on if you're Android or iOS. Um, and from there, it will open up a panel where you can choose how you want to see your birds. On Android, usually it defaults to bird packs, and then you would switch to likely birds. You'd set your location and date. So if you were planning to do a bird unit in a month, or you're getting ready for the Great Backyard Bird Count next month and you want to know what birds to expect to see then, you can change to that date and the location that you'll be birding in. And then I recommend clicking on most likely. And this is going to pull up a list of birds that you are most likely to see if you were to walk out your door on that day and go birding. And what that does for us as educators is it allows us to plan ahead and think about what birds we want our students to learn before they start birding. So that is a really functional tool. I'll talk about in a minute a couple of activities that build off of that, but I do want to pause and talk about the 4 major clues to bird ID. So the way that we like to think of bird identification at the lab is falling into kind of these 4 big clues: size and shape, color pattern, habitat, and behavior. I'll zoom in a little bit on size and shape because that's the first clue to bird ID, and it isn't always the most intuitive. Sometimes we want to jump right to color pattern, but it can be really useful to look at size and shape. As you can see in the poster example here, we have an evening grosbeak next to a American goldfinch, and they have similar coloration: black with white on the wings, a yellow body, black on the head. But we can look at the size and shape of the bird and know that these are different species. And we can tell that the grosbeak has a much larger beak, a bigger body, larger proportioned head. And so what looking at size does is it helps us put birds into groups. So that can be a really useful way to think about it. I won't play this video now, but I want you to know these exist. There are our inside birding videos. They are really fantastic. They're about 10 minutes, and there is one for each of the bird ID clues. So this one on the screen here is for inside birding size and shape. And it will kind of walk you through how to think about size and shape with birds. It's great to use with kids. I've had folks with kids um, in third grade use it. I would say K2, it's a little above them, but I know one teachers use these a lot with their third grade students and they love them. So a really useful tool. It'll go through all four clues. One of the things I love about size and shape is it allows us to kind of strip away color and focus on just this overall image of a bird. Or when we talk to kids, we often think of silhouettes as this first step, right? So, or the shadow of a bird. And so that lets us clue in on these parts of their bodies that are really useful for identification. So when we look at this heron, that long neck, those long legs, and that long beak really sticks out. And then if you can identify something to a group of heron, you're going to have a lot easier time identifying it. There's a lot fewer birds to flip through if you're using a field guide. And we can see this at play when we look at these silhouettes of different birds. A lot of times I'll have educators say, this is great, but I don't know birds, or my kids don't know birds. And I bet that we all know a little bit more than we think we do. If we look at these silhouettes, we can start to even maybe guess some of the groups that these birds are in. So let's look at one or two here. Let's look at number 2, this one right here on our screen. What group would you say that bird represents? A duck. Yeah. How do you know? This is always a fun question to ask kids. How do you know it's a duck? You know it's a duck because it's a duck, right? But it's sometimes fun to have kids articulate that. So we know it's got that kind of medium length neck. It's got webbed feet. It's got that wide flat bill. Absolutely. Yes. Let's jump to number 6. This bird flying right here. What group would you put that bird in? Some kind of bird of prey, an eagle or a hawk. Oh, I love people are already saying why. They're looking at the head shape, the wedged tail, the wide, the broad wingspan. Absolutely. Yeah, so just looking at size, or excuse me, we're not even looking at size here because these are not to scale. Otherwise, I'd be really afraid of that hummingbird number 7. Um, but we're just looking at shape here, right? But if you start to put in, oh, shoot. Ah, there it is. Okay. If you start to put in habitat clues, you can get even more information. So if we're looking at this image here, we can start to get some cool information using these habitat clues, and we might even be able to identify some of these birds. Let's go for this one right down here in the left-hand corner. Anybody know what this bird is? And you can just say group. Yeah, if you are a particular waterfowl nerd or duck nerd, you might recognize those 2 little curly cues over the back end of the duck, and that actually tells us this is a drake or a male mallard duck. What about this bird right here with the pointy tail on the wire? Anybody have an ID for that one? I see a couple people saying dove, and then I see somebody actually saying species. I saw a couple of people say mourning dove. Yes, this is a mourning dove. I also saw kestrel, and it can look a lot like a kestrel. The thing that gives it away as a mourning dove is how pointy that tail is. with a tiny little head. I've heard it described as an ice cream cone bird, and now that's how I see it, with the head being a little cherry on top. So yeah, once you add in habitat, size and shape can really provide you some great clues to identification. Let's see. There we go. And so one of the things, if you haven't used Merlin before, one of the cool things about Merlin is it uses a bird size scale to judge size in the field. And it uses four very familiar birds, from a house sparrow to a robin to a crow to a goose. Because size is one of the most difficult things to judge in the field, it's really great to use birds that you know to kind of compare and figure out size. So that's how Merlin approaches size. So that's a great thing to practice with kids too, just having them say, even if you don't go for the full idea of a bird when you see it, is it larger than a crow, smaller than a crow? Have them practice that is a great skill to learn too. Another resource that's available to you is All About Birds. This is a really fantastic site. It's basically like an online field guide and it has fantastic information about birds. So if you go on there, you type in the search bar, say something like a house finch, you can pull up a species account. And it has all this fantastic information about the house finch, really great photos, videos, sounds that you can listen to. But it also has really great life history facts. So things like what does it eat? Where does it live? Where does it nest? What's its conservation status? So you could have kids do research projects on their birds to get to know them really well. So another fantastic resource out there. The ID info section is really great too. It walks you through some photos and IDs and even lets you compare similar species. And we'll check that out if we have some time. So let's talk about how we can use some different activities and some of the skills we've just talked about to get to know our local birds. So there's two main activities I want to focus on. They both incorporate art and local birds. So one of the things I love to have kids do is make their own bird bingo card. And so the key to this is knowing what 9 birds to use. And so Merlin is fantastic for this. You can use that explore and sort by likely that we discussed earlier to generate a list of 9 birds that students can use to create their own bird bingo card. So you can leave it up to them where they position each bird on the sheet of paper and then challenge them to draw the bird. And so this is going to have them focus in on the color, the size, the shape, and really get to know these 9 birds. And then once you go outside and play bird bingo, you have a selection of birds that your youth know how to identify, that are common in your area, which is a great first step to participating in the Great Backyard Bird Count. I did just drop a link to a blog that has this activity. This activity is also in the Youth Action for Birds resource that I mentioned. But yeah, it's also available on our blog and it will walk you through the steps in Merlin as well to get a list. If you want to have your kids know more in depth about a bird species, another approach you could take is to make your own field guide as a classroom. So you can assign each student a bird to become an expert on. Again, you can use Merlin to find that list. You could even use eBird to find a list of birds in your area that have been spotted recently. And then you can have them create their own essentially species account for their bird. So what's the name? Challenge them to create a scientific drawing of their species using different photos as sources. You can teach them about field marks or things that they can look for outside that will help them identify their bird and label it on their drawing. Have them look up their species sounds, even write some cool natural history facts on the back, which you could look up on the All About Birds website. And then you can display them around your room and have your own bird gallery, or you could even put them in essentially your own field guide and have that be a resource that your youth are using when they are practicing their bird ID skills or counting birds. So these are two just really great activities. I find that drawing and having students draw their birds can be a really helpful way to get them to tune into their bird ID and get to know their bird really well. And some students will get really excited about the art part of it too, and that will draw some other folks in as well. So, any questions about what we've discussed so far? We do have a little bit more time, so I could use that time to demonstrate Merlin's Sound ID, or we could explore the All About Birds website. Um, Feel free to share a preference in the chat window. Otherwise, feel free to ask questions. I do want to say that you are welcome to keep in touch with us. If any questions come up in the future, you can reach us at k12lab@cornell.edu, and that will come to my team and we can help you find resources or answer questions for you. If you're an educator who needs a completion letter for one contact hour, I'm going to send a link in the chat window to where you can download the contact letter, and it is a fillable form, so you're able to add your name to that and use that for your one contact hour from us. But yeah, would anybody like to see either Merlin? Molly's asking about tips for leading a bird walk, especially in winter. Winter can be challenging, right? Especially if your students don't all have good winter gear. Some folks will have extras that can be useful if you're able to get donations from families to have some extra gloves and hats around. That comfort piece is pretty important to meet to have a successful bird walk. Um, One of the things that I think is important to do in winter is you're not going to be seeing a ton of birds, so you can focus in on maybe a few species that you want to get to know well. Typically, things like woodpeckers are going to be around, chickadees, blue jays, cardinals, seed eaters are going to be around a lot. So you can use Merlin to get to know what birds are going to be around and maybe have even a focus bird and really challenge yourself to try and see that bird, find a way to make the walk a little more exciting. Um, you can use, if you're able to travel, you can use eBird to find a location that has birds hanging around at the moment. But yeah, you can also challenge yourself to look for evidence of birds. Look for old bird nests, look for old woodpecker holes. Just get kids kind of tuning in and practicing those observation skills as well. Kathleen, great suggestion. Kathleen's bringing up that you can reach out to your local Audubon chapters. They are often fantastic resources, can offer you a lot of help and suggestions. Sometimes folks will even come to your classroom and present about birds for you. So yes, Noelle's asking about Merlin and does it work on tablets with no connectivity? Yes, but so Merlin does work on tablets. There's it has to be a sufficiently advanced operating system. And you'll want to open Merlin and kind of get everything downloaded first before you take it out. So Merlin is a multi-part download now. So you'll download the app, you'll need to open it, you'll need to download a bird pack for your region, so it will have the birds on your device. If you plan on using Sound ID, you'll also need to download Sound ID. If you have all of those things downloaded and Merlin opened when you're on Wi-Fi and then go outside, typically it will work. It's actually gotten better as it's gone on about working without access to data. So the question is there anything we need to do on Merlin app to register for the Great Backyard Bird Count, or is it automatic when recording within those 4 days? It is automatic. So if you do your 15 minutes on those 4 days, that will automatically count for the Great Backyard Bird Count. If you're choosing to keep a paper list and submit it online later, you'll want to do it within like a week of the Great Backyard Bird Count to make sure it gets counted in the totals. Um, but yes, if you submit a list through eBird during that time, that meets the criteria, it automatically counts. Can you submit GBBC data from my students outside of the official 4 dates since we don't have school on those days? Yeah, that's the challenge, right? Since it is a 3-day weekend, there might only be one day that you have school. Maybe there's not any. Um, if they count birds at home and you have the location, you can submit those data online and still have it count if it happened during those days. If you are not able to count birds during those 4 days, it won't count for the Great Backyard Bird Count, but it will always count for eBird. So you can always submit data to eBird anytime, anywhere, any place. So it will always count in that way. Yes, so the link I will drop real quick. The link to the education resources I mentioned, 3 different lessons, the Explorer's Guidebook, Feathered Friends, and the Youth Action for Birds. Use the Merlin account on various student iPads without setting up separate accounts. Yes, so Merlin will ask for an email address to let you use it on a device. You can use the same email address multiple times over. So you could have students put in your teacher email address, and that would be sufficient to get Merlin running on multiple devices. So that will work for that. For eBird, similarly, but you'll need an actual full account for eBird. And as Becca mentioned, their website can tell you how to sign up for a group account if you're working with students under 13. The questions. I'm just taking another quick look. Oh, how do you access the recording to share? I will be uploading the video, the recorded webinar to our YouTube channel. I will send that out to everyone who registered. So since you're here, you're registered, so you'll get an email from me with a link to the recording as well as a link to all the resources that Becca or I discussed tonight. And that email should come out on Friday. I am switching computers tomorrow, so barring any catastrophes, I'm hoping it will be up on Friday, and I'll send that email then. Bird ID is featured in eBird Explorers. There's also the inside birding videos, which actually I could drop a link to that in the window here. Let me grab those real quick. So actually, I'll just show you how to find them. Is my screen still sharing? I think so. So to find the inside birding videos, you can just Google them. Sorry, but you could also go to academy.allaboutbirds.org, which is a great place to go if you want to take some courses to learn about birds. There's also fun learning games. And then if you search for Inside Birding, and the how-to videos, and if you click on any one of these that pops up, the first one is the size and shape video. it will link to all four there. So all four use those four clues to bird ID that we talked about. So I was like, oops. Oh my gosh. I did not expect it to autoplay. I just gave myself a heart attack. I will drop a link to that in the chat window. Should have known it was going to autoplay. I've opened this website plenty of times. It is just about 8 o'clock, so if you need to sign off, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm happy to stick around for a few more minutes if folks have any more questions. Otherwise, I hope you will join us on a future webinar, and I hope you'll enjoy getting out there and counting birds for the Great Backyard Bird Count. Thanks for coming, Kathleen. Great to see you. Enjoy the GBBC. I will pass your thanks on to Becca. She had to dash, but I love hearing her talk about the GBBC and the history of it.